David Olandan Davenport. It's so exciting to talk to you about our experience growing up in DC in the 70s and how we met through the wonderful Field School and, of course, with Elizabeth Ely.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, Martin. I'm looking forward to this trip back down memory lane.
First of all, I just thought we came from very different versions of Washington, D.C. I mean, I grew up in Northwest Washington. My parents were still middle class, but they managed to buy a house for 30 grand in, which is now like one of the fanciest places of Washington, the smallest house in all of Spring Valley, as you know. But we came from kind of different worlds. And I thought I'd like to start that because we met at the Field School just as students, but came from somewhat different parts of DC.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it couldn't be much different. I grew up in the projects that they called it the ghetto at the time in Southwest DC. It was considered a war zone by the police, and they didn't come in unless they came in sort of a group. So it was a tough neighborhood.
And that's to me one of the, first of all, honoring Elizabeth Ely, the director. She really had a commitment. She wanted diversity at a time, I think, way ahead of her time. Don't you think?
I mean, Elizabeth, she's like an angel. And by the way, you do know that Sharaine, her daughter, just recently passed, right?
No, I did not. Oh,
Yeah,
wow. So
sure.
we want to
Sharaine.
acknowledge her too. Yeah.
Yes, she
Yeah.
recently passed from cancer, and believe it or not, given what we're about to do or what we're doing, it's interesting. We've come full circle because they've asked me to be the MC at her memorial service.
Oh, that's wonderful. I couldn't think of a better person.
Well, thank
Excellent.
you,
Yeah.
thank you.
And she was also the English, she was a teacher there as well
Exactly.
as she's I have a story about how she kept me from going into the infantry. She my
Oh,
I
really?
was ready
I
to
can't wait to
sign up.
hear it.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I was signed up. My parents told her, and really, with my ADD and dyslexia challenges, it probably wasn't the right place to go. I was trying to do it to get out of something, figure out. But I met her at her house, and she lived near in the same apartment as Elizabeth, and she locked the door with the key and said, "I'm not leaving until you convince me you're not going into the infantry," because they, how they felt it wasn't the right place. I still think it probably wasn't at the time. I was pretty tightly wound at that point.
You were, but I mean, it's interesting how, as students, we all had our challenges,
Yeah.
but I never thought of you. I mean, the challenges you just identified never occurred to me. I always thought of you as one of the brighter students.
Yes, yeah. Well, I had a conversation. There was something wrong with me because I was actually put in what then we called. You didn't know this, the what we called the retarded class in fourth grade. And
Really?
what it was is she was the only tutor. I didn't know that. So as a kid, I made up something's really wrong with me, which really didn't get resolved at a deep level for me till my 40s. So I didn't see the version you did. You know what I mean? I was like, and we all, I was telling my neighbor, we all kind of have our cross to bear, in
Right,
the
right.
world, and it's all different. And you don't want to disrespect someone else's, but that was the the Field School was profound for me because I went from a wonderful privates. I went from the public school and then I was to repeat fourth grade and they got me into Woodward School for Boys. Did you ever hear of that downtown
I
Washington?
I did not.
It was a great school. It was where affordable working class would send their sons. It was mostly African American kids, and it was just terrific. Police officers would send their kids, a working class that could afford a private school, and that was just fantastic. But it closed. It went bankrupt, and then I went to congressional where I never fit in. I was not a congressional. I don't not nothing wrong with it, but I wasn't a whatever that class of people were. And then I went to I didn't fit in. I had all types of problems. And then we found the field school and I sat down. I got to sit down with Elizabeth Ely on my own and talk with her. And I came out and apparently told my parents, we've discussed it. Okay. And I'm coming here. you know?
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. And you know her. I mean, she probed me and asked questions. I mean, she screened every student to make sure it was the right match.
She was an incredible woman. I had the good fortune to speak at her memorial
Yeah.
service as
I was
well.
there. It was
Oh,
wonderful.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you. And I remember recounting the story of how I was too embarrassed or not confident enough to look at her when we
Uh-huh.
talked. And after about 2 or 3 minutes, she said, "David," in her voice, very stern
Yeah.
voice, and say, "You look at people when you're talking to them." And I've never forgotten that. And
Yeah.
now when like, for example, that room, we had what, about 200 people in that room,
Yeah.
and I've spoken before many crowded rooms, and I always remember that, and I'm always comfortable looking at people.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that was the exciting thing because at field school, none of us really knew the background. I think she just, these are the students. The standards were held equal for everyone.
Right.
If you did something wrong or me, we had to talk to Elizabeth. You know, and I think that was such a profound experience that occurred because, like you said, I went home to a really pretty safe neighborhood, and you went home to a pretty not safe neighborhood.
Oh man, let me tell you, I don't know that you know this, but I had joined a gang we called them crews when I was about 11, so that would have been 71, which was the year before I came to the field school. It started in 72, 73, right?
Mm-hmm.
So at any rate, once I came to the field school, I had to live a double life because of going to the field school with you guys and then going home and trying to be in a gang just wasn't working. And Elizabeth told me, listen, you got to get your grades up or you can't stay here anymore. You have to leave. And so I started to move away from the gang because at some level I didn't want to disappoint my mother or my brother.
Mm-hmm.
But in doing that, the gang started to reject me and they would throw bricks at me. They chase me. I had to think of different routes to get home because my house was right near the gang base. I mean, you could see my house from the where everybody was sitting. So that was my experience during the ninth, eighth, and ninth grade.
Yeah, and that as you and I know is very very hard to get out of. I mean, once you get deep enough into a gang, it's a family that doesn't want to let you go. It's kind of, and
Yeah.
and so it's a miracle you got out of that. And no, I didn't know that. That's why I want to have this discussion because these are the things, you got to be just another kid at the field school. We both had, whatever you had at home, you could leave and be that. And so I never knew that. And I knew it would be an important discussion to have about it. And it's a miracle you got out. I mean, look at all the things you've done with your life, with the kids, the influence you had on all of us. I mean, our reunion, we all kind of care about each other. Even I'm sure if we see any of them, Joe Habib and the gang.
Yeah.
And yeah, and that would have been possible if there wasn't this Elizabeth who just said, I'm going to have this school. I want it this way. I want people to meet and learn different perspectives."
I mean, I don't know that words can really do her justice. She was just first of all, she was so committed to the kids.
Hmm.
But she was also very creative and very smart. I mean, I remember in our math class when she started playing classical music, I'm like, oh my God, what is wrong with this woman? But when you look back on it, you realize that she was just trying to get us into a frame of mind. And those kinds of experience, the 2 week internships, the
Hmm.
essence of the field school. She was
Hmm.
just so creative, and the idea of the field was that in a field, in a community, you have different people, and we all make up that community, and you have to respect everybody. All very brilliant
Yeah,
ideas.
yeah. I know one thing is you took an aptitude for athletics there. And were you on the football team? They had a kind of a small football team.
I starting cornerback, and I think I played some running back, and that was a crazy experience, man. Woo, we got hurt. We played some really big guys that year.
It was just a little. I mean, people need to understand what was the total number of students? Somewhere between 80 or 100 students in the whole school, right?
Well, when we started out, we were 44
Uh huh.
in 72, 73, and we grew from there. As a matter of fact, the football team you talk about, we didn't have enough people on the team, I mean, in the school to make up a whole team. So we joined with Mackin,
Uh huh.
another school, a Catholic school, and we combined to make one team.
That's fantastic. And
Yeah.
so I remember, as a pretty good athlete, but I also just remembered you as a pretty good dresser for some reason. I think you paid
Ah.
attention, on appearance and stuff. So,
Well, coming from my neighborhood, you had to be able to dress. I think my heroes when I was coming through Southwest was Superfly.
uh
I don't
huh.
know if you remember that
Yes,
movie.
of course. Yeah.
Goldie, all those black exploitation movies. Those were our heroes.
But it was the only thing there. I mean, there was nothing else. I mean, when I went to Woodward, that was from fourth until I guess sixth or something when they closed. But those were heroes too. That was, and then there was, of course, Motown and Al Green. And now I have to tell you one thing I didn't appreciate at that time was Parliament and Funkadelic because I saw
Funkadelic.
Motown as the real musicians and rock and roll, the Doors or that as real musicians. And I didn't take them serious until years later. I went through the African American Museum and realized how paramount they were in pioneering things. But I think you were you into them at that time or not?
I'm an original Funketeer,
All
baby.
right.
I'm an original Funketeer. I saw the Mothership land the first time around, and I almost cried. Needless to say, I was inebriated. In those days, we did what we did, right?
Yeah.
So, you puff, puff, pass, and
Yeah.
everybody's puffing. Oh my God, it was crazy.
But what I didn't realize is that they were the first band that had large props on stage. Black band, that there was no one else had. They were pioneers in so many aspects, and I learned about it. So, the motherships at the African American Museum. I don't know if you've gone through, but
Absolutely, absolutely.
his outfits there, and of course, I was into uh, technology and science and synthesizers. So the Moog synthesizer they played was there. Bootsy, I
Mhm.
think, was a musician.
Bootsy, Bernie Worrell. I mean, I actually represented them.
Really?
Once years later, when I became a lawyer, I represented them in London.
Wow. Wow. That
Yeah, so it was full circle for me.
Yeah, well, so I have to tell you, I'm cleaning out my parents' house after they passed, and I'm listening to Flashlight and going
Oh,
back and
that's my
rewatching this
song.
stuff. You know?
That- That's my theme song, baby.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that showcases the famous Moog synthesizer extremely well, and it was
I,
pioneer with that.
man, that song was like, man. But Martin, listening to you, and just reflecting back, I think, it's very astute of you to want to bring to the audience our experience. But the one thing that I remember about myself is how intimidated and how inferior I felt. I mean, I had an inferiority complex when I came to the field school. I mean, I didn't feel worthy. I mean, you guys, I don't know about your parents. I remember coming to your house at some point,
Yeah.
but like David Breeden and some of the people there,
Yeah.
they had maids that lived in better houses than I lived in. And I
Right.
was like, damn, that's amazing.
Yeah, no, and I just want to tell you, I never got that from you. So you had a good facade on in the field school. Your front for survival was working because I didn't want people to know I thought I was too stupid to be alive, and I was, but I had a passion of science and technology, and that's what the field school did. It created an environment where we could in many ways step into a new role, don't you think? That of what we want to
Absolutely.
create.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, I had never been involved with white people before. I
Uh-huh.
had never had a conversation with a white person. I mean, only thing I knew about white people was from what I learned from Malcolm X,
Hmm.
other people who had had their experiences. I certainly knew that my brother was a Black Panther,
Hmm.
and so I understood the more radical aspects. And talked about this at Elizabeth's memorial. Being at the field school and being exposed to people like you made me realize that not all white people were evil.
Right,
And
right.
I
No,
and
I
I
understand.
and I later realized that not all black people were good. So it was an important transformation for somebody who's as passionate and extreme as I am.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think that's the lessons we indirectly learned about that place and the environment because we had opportunities that existed. And like I said, I remember you were as an athlete, and I always admired you. That I kind of honestly, I saw you more as a ladies' man than myself. Just to let you know, back then, you know.
Well, I like the ladies. That continues today.
Yeah, but you seem to be more comfortable talking to him than I was. So just let
Well,
you know, and
you were very intense. I mean
yeah,
that we agree on, but
yeah.
we thought, wow, he's really like a mad scientist because you were so focused on the. I remember watching you work with lasers one day, and I was like, damn, this guy is brilliant, man. He's working with lasers.
I earned the thing to go to the National Science Foundation scholarship that Elizabeth got connected to on holography and video, but she really wanted it to be a fair playing field. Anyone could have gone for it. And I got to do that, learned about lasers. And of course, our buddies from before had gone and they set up the hologram table. And then I went to Elizabeth and said, I want to teach a class in holography. I spent my summer writing a book and I handed her a 115-page book. And and she said, "You read all this?" She looked at I had drawings and everything. I go, "Okay, you work a curriculum. You got to be supervised. Who's going to be your supervisor?" And I think you were in the group. I think the
Yeah,
hologram gang, right?
I remember. That's why we thought you were so smart. We were like, damn, man, this dude is bad.
Yeah. Well, I think what it was is my mother was smart because she said, "Okay, you enjoyed this event." She knew I was a teenager, and you know how teenagers get in trouble. She goes, "If you want to write a book, I'll type it up if you write it." Okay.
Mm.
So what I do is I'd research in the basement all summer, and I bet, and then I worked out too. We have to talk about the weight
Yeah,
training stuff we
I
did.
remember. You got pretty buffed. I remember.
Yeah, yeah. But she I would hand it to her and drew it, and she wrote, and I at the end of the summer wrote a book. What a brilliant thing of my mother to keep me out of trouble. You know what I mean? I've got a project. I'm an intense child. Let's focus him on something that's not destructive. But my mom, she was wicked
I
smart,
do.
and
I do remember her.
she was an advocate for everyone who didn't have a voice. She was advocate for child labor laws. In fact, I on her funeral, I talked about how I believe she was the pioneer of child labor laws. She had I don't know if you know it, but in when she was in the women's school in North Carolina, she got to go to Raleigh for kind of play acting like Congress when they were out. It was like the JCs or something. And
Really?
she wrote an article. She proposed a bill, not a real one, a bill that African Americans should not have to sit at the back of the bus. It got into the Greensboro paper, and the Klan burned a cross on the principals of the school's lawn, and she was almost thrown out of school. So, my mother
Really? I
was
never
just,
knew that.
yeah, right. And when, as she got older, I paid someone to research, and because I didn't know these weren't made up stories. And you don't know. And she went, no, this is all true. Your mother seems to be the leader of child labor laws and did this. And then the wonderful closing piece is when she got in trouble, which to her was a horrible, scary thing. She always remembered, like, terrified of going out of school. If you don't straighten up, we can't bring attention to the school. You're out. And so she did say, but this nice person wrote me a letter of how courageous that was. That was the person 10 years later who actually initiated the law.
Really?
I tracked all this down, that
Wow.
I didn't know. And of course it's fitting I went to field school, isn't it? An interaction from her background, interest, and passion, and also she was a leader in women having more opportunities. I got to meet someone named Bella Abzug. Did you ever hear of Gloria Steinem? Bella? They were like leaders in the women's movement.
Well, I certainly know Gloria Steinem.
Yeah,
Bella Abscess is vaguely familiar, but
yeah,
I mean, that's amazing that your mother did that. I mean, we were kids when
yeah.
I would come over to your house, and she wouldn't engage me in deep conversation, but she was always very nice to me. She was very cool, so I can see why now.
Yeah, yeah. And so, yeah, the other thing I wanted to talk about is some of the activities. What were some of the other activities you were involved with? You were involved with sports, right? You
At
were,
the field school,
at
yeah,
the field school.
I was among the group that chose the blue and gold, which is the school color to today,
Yeah,
and the falcon.
yeah.
I remember sitting. Now, were you there when we were on Connecticut Avenue?
Yep, that's where I came in. The
Right.
big house.
Right. No, the house was on Wyoming.
Oh, okay. No, I was on. No, you're right. You were there before me.
Right.
Okay. I got there when they were on Wyoming off of Connecticut Avenue.
Right,
Right.
right. That was we moved. At any rate, yeah, when we first got there, like I said, there were 44 of us on the second floor of this built office building. And everything was done by like by the seat of your pants. I
Hmm.
remember coming in once and seeing Elizabeth scrubbing the toilet, and she was always so intimidating to me, and I was like, I mustered up enough courage to ask her. It's like, "What are you doing? Why are you doing that?" And she said to me something that I remember to this day. She said, "People want to accomplish things, but they don't want to clean the toilets.
Wow.
You got to be able to clean the toilets if you're serious." And I just
Wow.
thought about that, and I
Yeah.
never ever forget that. You have to be able to do the nitty-gritty stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, the first major activity that I remember at the field school was to move. The way we moved from I guess it was 17 something Connecticut to the big house, as you call it, is each of us grabbed a desk, and there were 44 students, and we were like ants. And it was like 4 blocks, and we would like go up Connecticut, cross over, and go up to Wyoming. And it was amazing. That's how we moved.
Wow. Wow. And you all moved it over. And so do you remember anything about how she got that wonderful house? Because she was relentless in improving things.
I don't remember the story, but it was similar to how when she moved on Foxhall Road. It's just God would provide her an opportunity because you know that she helped start Edmund Burke, right?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, she was one of the founders of Edmund Burke, and as far as I understand it, I mean, I'm not precise, but I believe there was a falling out or a difference of creative direction. And so she left, and now Edmund Burke still exists to today. And so she's responsible for not one but two institutions that are training our children. But
Wow.
then she got this opportunity to get the lease for 1711. And as I said, like with Foxhall Road, I think it was just some fortuitous discussion that she had where the people were interested in what she was trying to do and offered the house to her for some incredible price.
That's just
That's how she
terrific.
got it.
Yeah,
That's how it
that
happened.
was my experience. And then in the back they had a wood shop area, and then of course an area for athletics kind of on the side, right? A little bit of
Yeah, the volleyball court.
the volleyball court.
And
Yeah.
you remember the big sign Davenport is a fag?
No, I don't.
You don't
No.
remember?
No. No.
That
Yeah.
was that was Habib and
Oh,
Paul
I see.
Alvarez.
Yeah.
They just decided because in that time and in that environment, politically correct wasn't something we knew.
No, of course, but teasing was. It was
Exactly.
pretty brutal, right?
Exactly. So they decided they woke up one day and say, I think it's a good idea to mount a smear campaign against David.
Oh my God. That
So
was
in the bathrooms, I can't believe you can't remember this, but on that wall there,
yeah. Yeah.
it was a big letters. They spray painted Davenport as a fag.
Oh my God. Oh wow. How that was so but that was a big thing for you to just, survive with. I mean, how did that affect you?
And it was funny because I mean, I laughed when I saw it. I was like, "That's funny as shit." Um, as a matter of fact, Elizabeth got so bothered by it that she called. You remember those group meetings she used to have?
Yeah,
When we
get
all,
everybody in. Yeah.
yeah, and she said, "This is wrong. You guys shouldn't do it."
Yeah.
And I was laughing at
You
me.
were
I
still
said,
laughing. I get it,
"I was like." I'm like, "This is funny as hell." I
Yeah.
mean, when
Yeah.
you're dodging people throwing bricks at you,
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah, no live bullets, you could say, right? This is
yeah,
spray paint. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, so he finally fessed up and said, "Well, we thought it was funny." I was like, "Oh, it was funny."
Yeah, right.
Elizabeth gave him after school detention for like 3 weeks, I think.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. But
Yeah.
they're great memories. We had diplomats, kids in there. We had such a wide variety of people that
Oh
we
man.
all interacted with on that point. But again, Elizabeth was always trying something new. Remember our history teacher? We reenacted Civil War things, right? As a passing the
Absolutely.
flag.
Absolutely. Did you go to Paul Alvarez's birthday party in the Capitol?
I
Or were
don't
you
think so. I don't think I
okay?
made
Well,
that one.
well,
Yeah.
Paul Alvarez's father was Jim Alvarez, a senator from I think it was South Dakota, because he was I think Indian or something, or I can't remember. But anyway, he was a senator, U.S. senator, and so from my neighborhood, you can see the U.S. Capitol. And I had seen it, growing up there, but the idea of being inside it never crossed my mind. And here I am at a party for a kid in my class in the Capitol in one of the
Right.
rooms. I was like, "Oh my God, man!" It was surreal. It was surreal, Martin.
Yeah, it was wonderful. And then we had, of course, the holography stuff. That was
Yeah,
exciting to have you
that
in, and
that
I had to
was.
give tests, and you all did. I have to tell you, you would razz me, but you participated. So I really thank you all for. Except we have a picture of it that I have, and I think Joe slipped a cigarette or something in his mouth right before the picture was taken.
I
So I
think
kind of
I remember
I
that.
photoshopped that out when I put it on the online for to protect the school to not know about it. But that was such a wonderful experience of teaching holography. And I want to tell you, I just got to honor my physics teacher at the university because he got a big award. They asked me to present, and I really wanted to be a physicist because I wanted to understand the fabric of reality. And when I look back, I think I might have done that as a I don't know why, but most kids at teenage years weren't trying to solve those problems. You know what I mean? There was a that was, but I opened with a joke of I wanted to be a physicist, but so I took calculus the third time and decided not to be it. With my core dyslexia, I didn't realize I didn't get the fundamentals down enough to really build onto the advanced math. But that spark that occurred at field school carried through the university. And then the physics instructor had this attitude: you don't have to do the math to love science and physics. And he was a catalyst later for that as well. So all of those things influenced who we are today, because I'm a success coach and trainer, but I come at it of understanding humanity and business and how to make them work together effectively to get results.
That's great, man. I mean, it's interesting hearing your perspective of yourself during that period because it was just so different than we all thought of you. We agree with you. I agree with you that we thought you were wound a little tight, but we thought of you as being just incredibly bright.
I'm honored because I always thought the same of everyone else. Several things I remember the weightlifter trainer, Clark Vent.
Yes, yes,
And
yes,
how they all, it was so funny. They all went there. He was matched my intensity. But the
yes.
other guys there, you all went and went, this is too intense. We're going. And everyone left but me. And Elizabeth would come check on me. You're doing okay. If it's you and him, that's it. But he taught me like full contact karate. And we were doing like what I now know would be like Marine Corps top of the line intense stuff, which with my intensity, kids at that level need that to keep out of trouble. It's like a thing to push up against, a challenge. And so I got to see him years later. He was working as a warden or something at Lorton Reformatory or something. Which, what a great job for such a former military. He trained dogs, attack dogs, and combat karate and stuff. I think for Vietnam or something. I mean, he was an amazing human being.
He was definitely intense. And you know that Joe became a physicist, right?
No, I did not know that. I missed that.
He
That's
got
funny.
he got his PhD in physics from MIT.
Wow. Wow.
This is
That's
after
amazing.
he got his ass kicked a couple times by police, so he decided to stop doing illegal stuff and go to school. So he went to UDC and got a BS or whatever, yeah, Bachelor's of Science in Physics. And somehow he got accepted in the MIT and he somehow graduated. And that's what he is today.
That's extraordinary. Now, he also was part of a wonderful project with some at-risk kids, taking them out in the wilderness. Weren't you involved in that or
I,
something? That was
I,
told that was a great service and
I
story.
I had thought about that in years. You got a good memory. I talked about some of the uh, activity. He was a, let's say, he was a purveyor of medicine. We'll put it that way. And he was very successful, and he had friends. And what I wanted to do, given where I come from, although by that time I had gone to college, then gone to law school, then I had got my advanced law degree. So I was starting to build my career, but didn't really have any money to give back. But I always maintained my relationship with Joe and people like you who were important to me at the field school. So he had access to these people who had money and who were willing to do something that made them feel good about themselves.
Mhm.
So what we did is we did it for about, I think, 10 years, but it could be a little less. We would go to these homeless shelters and we would basically take a group of about 20 kids out to this again, you talk about Elizabeth. She was given this sort of plot of land. It was like maybe 30, 40 acres, and it had houses on it. It had been a retreat, I believe. And so it was a fully functioning, had a kitchen, a commercial kitchen, etc., with houses, bunk houses. So we would take these kids out there and let them get away. We would teach them conflict resolution. We would just play games with them for about a week. And we did this for 10 years. And we were very successful. Years later, people would come up to us and say, "Oh, I remember you. Yeah, I went through your program. I'm doing this." It was very satisfying.
Yeah, I remember one thing is the kids being so terrified there weren't any lights and how humbling that was. That they had, you'd have some kids who are pretty tough, but when you got out in total darkness, that was a that was a paradigm shift for them, a real state change for them when they're out in the woods. And if you grow up in the city, it's never really night, you know. There's always lights around. I just remember that was one of the comments you or Joe Habib mentioned about the kids that really helped disrupt them to get them out of their world enough to have a new experience and see there could be something else in life.
Well, being having been one of those kids,
Yep.
I understood that, you create your image because you have to survive.
Yeah.
But you're really inside just a kid. And so you have lots of insecurities. And I look at the violence today. I just buried one of my cousins. He's 21 years old, very good guy. Um, got shot and killed, being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Unlike another cousin, about a year and a half ago, he was trying to be a gangster and got shot about 100 times.
Mm-hmm.
And so these kids need the opportunity to be kids. And yes, when they're put into a different environment, all that innocence and insecurity can come out if they think it's a safe space for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you. That was such a great thing you did. Then the yearbook, I mean, the yearbook Field School allowed me to, I think it was the first official yearbook. There might have been something before, but that was with Patty and Gabi. I'd love to, if you ever see them, I'd love to at least hear how they're doing. But I had to have, I said, Elizabeth, this school needs a yearbook. She goes, "What are you going to do about it?" You know what I mean? It's like, come back with a plan and we'll see what we talk about. That's the way she would do it is that's an idea. You didn't bring me a solution yet? And I
I
came
didn't
up with
know
a plan.
that you did that. I mean, I didn't
Yeah.
know that you I knew that you were involved, but I didn't know that you were the genesis of it.
Well, I went to her, said, I at Woodward, we always had yearbooks. I'd been on the yearbook staff, and I said, we need a yearbook. And she said, what are you going to do? And then thanks to Gabi and Patty, brilliant women that agreed to team up with me on it. And then we got the writing instructor, I think it was British or something, to oversee it. And he had done layout on things. In fact, I have some of the original plate, copies ready for the printer in
Really?
my possession. Elizabeth let me have those originals. Yeah. So I did a lot of the collages and stuff. And yeah, and I was so excited because, where else in a bigger school, you wouldn't have been able to go to the principal and said, "We need a yearbook," and they'd go, "We'll bring it to a committee." They wouldn't say, "What are you going to do about it?" You
Right.
want it,
That was
prove
Elizabeth. That was
prove
Elizabeth.
you can do it, and then I'll decide. She wouldn't promise it. And then she had little hoops for us to, me to jump through. Now you need to get an instructor who'll agree to help you. And I went off and did it, and then finally got a good team. It was as far as I can see, it was at least it was the first yearbook I knew during my time there. And
I
now
think
it's
that was
so
the first one.
and now it's like they've won awards and all types of stuff at Field School, and I got to go back and go. I was actually the one that went to Elizabeth, said we need a yearbook, and so
That well, I maybe we should honor you. But the sad thing, and I guess it's just reality, which comes with evolution of an institution like that. Elizabeth was such a rare creature. She's probably the most special leader that I've ever met. And I've met some leaders, but the field school is so different now. I
Yeah.
mean, it's incredibly different.
Yeah, but things have to evolve. I mean, I've been back there and I go, it's not what I had before, but I still, if you slow down and look at it, and it's of course there'll be no replacement for Elizabeth, but there are a lot of kids getting benefit. You can see and meet it. So it's still, it's going to have to evolve. Nothing's going to be able to stay the same. I'm just grateful there's still people out there helping kids, calling the field school, and inspiring them to be better in some way. But when you get that big, it's a lot harder to do some of the things that Elizabeth could do too.
Well, you're probably right. I think one of the reasons why I was so excited um, to have this conversation with you, other than I just enjoy seeing you,
Yeah.
is that as the word you used earlier is a miracle. I don't know that the field school now would have a space for a David Davenport as I was at that time. And so it's just wonderful for me to sort of recommit myself to doing what I need to do to give back.
Yeah, I do want to tell you, at least when I talk to them, they do have scholarships. It won't be the exact same, but they work to get scholarships. So they had, I mean, this is 5 or years ago, or that, scholarships to be able to try to include kids that normally couldn't go there. So it was a commitment to that. But there'll be nothing, there's only one Elizabeth. There's only our time in during time because we were through the time of the riots. We were through at least when I was at Woodward School for Boys, that's when Martin Luther King was shot. And,
Hmm.
this was a huge piece of history. We were in the middle of the apex of all this going on. I don't know if I mentioned it, but when I was, I came when King was shot, of course, I went to a school. I mentioned my mother and the students. So King was one of my heroes. It was like, I, it's like I just was one of the kids. I got to be that. I didn't notice that I looked different than them, because the media hadn't come in and said, "You guys need to notice you're all different and separate us out, whatever else we've done to keep us divided." So when King was shot, someone stood up and they were really mad at white people, and I was mad too. I said, "I want to kill white people." And I remember someone looking at me going, did Martin say that? But that was my mindset. I left the school and there was a gang coming down the street near the White House and they said, let's get him. And I think they said, let's get that honky. I don't remember. And I was looking for him, like I wanted to join him. And I had peers, get this, that surrounded me. I think Cotton was one of his name from Woodward. They surrounded me and got me out of there because I was like looking for who they were trying to get. And said run. I remember someone hit my back and said run, and we ran up and got out of the range. And it was the students. Who knows what occurred? That because people, it's hard to understand of how when you feel like your future possibility is destroyed. I really know how people can get really mad. You know.
Yeah, that period was certainly from my vantage point a very extreme period for the Black community.
Yeah.
After Dr. King died, there was a lot of turmoil, and of course, the they undermined the FBI, undermined the Black Panthers. I think I mentioned to
Right.
you that they my brother was a Black Panther, so I was really involved in that. The Nation of Islam was very involved in our community, but at the same time, you had drugs really proliferating
Mm-hmm.
in our community. So it was such an extreme time. I'll tell you this quick story about my mother. didn't want me to be like my father, who was a drug dealer, or my brother, who robbed drug dealers. And so she sent me down to South Carolina. So between 62 and 68, I was sort of bouncing back and forth between DC and South Carolina, mostly in South Carolina. But after King died, I came back. Sometime after that, my brother was killed. Uh, and I remember walking down the street. This was broad daylight, and this is truth. This really happened. I'm walking down the street in the Southwest, and I see this guy coming toward me. I am generally familiar with him, and he's oblivious to me, but I notice he has a rifle in his hand. I mean, sort of like remember the old Western rifleman?
Yeah.
So he's got a rifle like that, and he's looking for somebody. And I remember thinking, this place, because it was so different than the small town I was living in South Carolina. But this guy was walking in broad daylight looking to kill somebody. About a week later, I saw this guy jump into a car. A man pulled up to a stop sign right in front of my house on the side of it. And this guy proceeded to just beat this man in his face with both fists because the man was behind the steering wheel. So he was sort of locked in. The guy got in the passenger side and just sort of he beat him into submission. This was the kind of lifestyle I was used to in Southwest. And so coming to the field school during that period was quite a reprieve for me.
Yeah, where you really were safe walking around the halls. I mean, I don't think anyone I don't remember a lot of bad fights or anything occurring. There might have been kind of a little spats, but not much. I
No, there were
I
no
I
fights at the field school.
I do remember I think that's so important what you said because was it P.D. Green that got on the airways after King was shot?
PD Green.
And basically said this is not what he stands for. And I think he changed the course of history. And for years, I would write the director saying, you need to do a story about P.D. Green and Martin Luther King because I heard it on the radio. My mother, when I got home, my mother had the bags packed because it looked like all of Washington was burning. And I'm so glad you got to meet her because our first thing was, you need to understand these are just angry people. These are good people that have lost a wonderful leader. She didn't want me to be a racist, and what she didn't know, David, is that I wanted to go kill white people in my mind. You understand? My mom's trying to make sure I don't get biased, and I'm like little kid going, "I want to be there." They killed my hero. That's why I said we lived through such extraordinary time, but from different perspectives. That's like you said. I didn't walk down Spring Valley worried about a brick being thrown at me or someone getting shot, or the fact of is, well, the people that are cool seem to be doing some dealing or something. In fact, they took me out of the Cub Scouts. I was in the Cub Scouts and they found out the Boy Scouts were getting into drugs in DC. So they never let me go to the Boy Scouts, that
Really?
type of thing. Yeah.
Well, fortunately, that was the worst experience that you knew of because we've since learned that there were worse experiences in
Yes.
the Boy Scouts.
Yeah, unfortunately,
Unfortunately,
yeah. And
yeah,
I know some good people that have worked to let's take the evil that occurred and do something to help the kid. I was
yeah,
a good friend doing that. But
good.
we had such a blessed time with it, and it's so exciting to chat. I just want to tell you something that I think you see your view is what breaks down barriers from cultures and others. In my experience, is slow down and get to know each individual like a unique individual. Don't put your mind will put them in a group, but just first get them know as an individual. Then know they're going to have different cultural things. If they look or sound different than you, get to know those. And that's been one of the greatest blessings I feel I learned in DC is instead of you're in a group and you're in a group, okay, let's start with the individual and get to know them and then learn out. What's your views on that?
Yeah, I think that's right. The only thing I would say is when you slow down, um, you also have to know who you are,
Yep.
because one of
Yep.
the real important steps for me not to feel inferior to you guys when I was at the field school was to begin to understand who I was and who I am. And that was extremely helpful. And then it allowed me to be more accepting of you guys as I realized how different you were.
Yeah, and I'm going to add something because I've really done a lot of thinking on it. In fact, I have a men's book coming out
Oh,
this
yeah.
year. I'm
Oh,
eager to
that's right.
get you
You
guys a
told me about
copy of
that.
it. Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
and I really think it's about understanding who we are as who what did Forrest Gump says? Stupid is as stupid does. Our
You're right.
behaviors. It's
Right.
really more like in my view of you from hearing this, you chose to step into another world and then live out of that world until it anchored into your body. I don't know. I spent a lot of time trying to figure out, am I intrinsically good or evil, and
Mm.
not knowing. And I'm going, and then I went,
Or
wait a
both.
second, that's a stupid question. I'm both. Right. I'm both.
Right. Right.
Who am I going to be in the world is a different conversation. And it gives an anchor. And I really think you chose unconsciously to be committed to being a different person at the field school. And then you got some reinforcement versus being in a gang, which is another way of being in the world. I feel commitment has more freedom than, learn to be yourself. What the hell is that? I mean, what if intrinsically you're abused so much yourself is it wants to hurt other people? Because that's tragically what happens with a lot. Some people are abused and then they want to just abuse. From hearing your story, I really think it's you chose I'm going to be David Davenport, at the field school. And you then stepped into it and got reinforced in a lot of great ways.
Well, I did, but I feel compelled to say that I was extremely blessed. I mean, I know
Yeah.
that this conversation is about the field school, but when you talk about me making choices, I feel compelled to give credit to my mother, who was
Mm-hmm.
very spiritual. She was a woman of faith. Um, and so she taught me the idea of love and loving people. The field school helped me deepen and broaden that understanding. And then my brother, who through a fortuitous conversation with Elizabeth, introduced me to the field school, but he also introduced me to meditation and the idea of being balanced and being concerned about people as well. So those two individuals in particular and others, but I was blessed, man. It wasn't me, making some huge superhuman
Right.
decision.
Right.
I was just
Right. No, I
lucky.
understand. No, I don't want environment is so critical. Environment, and then we have our temperament towards it, and then what we let in. And so I really love that. And you're also the honor of your mother. What an amazing woman. I mean, think of being a woman where your husband's this and your old, one son looks like he's potentially lost. I mean, her eyes, right? And then how do I save my last son? Let's get him out of this environment. She was a real courageous woman in her own right, because that was not an easy thing to do to even get you out of the city in that situation.
Yeah, I found a letter that my mother wrote to us because she lived to be 97. In fact, I just lost her last year. But when she was turning 70, which would have been, I guess, 27 years ago, 26 years ago, she wrote this letter to my brother and I, um, my remaining brother and I, that she didn't expect that we would read until, of course, she was gone. And she apologized because she felt that she had failed us.
Oh.
And, it made me really sad because she sacrificed so much. And because of her, more than anybody else, more than Elizabeth, that I am who I am today.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Well, some of us believe that they're still with us,
Yeah,
in some
well,
way.
I still feel her, looking down like, "Hey, what are you gonna do now? I mean,
Yeah,
are you gonna
right.
are you gonna
I
keep
mean,
pushing forward or not?"
yeah. And look at what that's fantastic. Well, I thought we'd just close since you're going to recognize Sharaine,
Yes.
a comment on her, because I think we've covered a lot of territory, and I'm hoping
Yes.
people enjoyed this. This was going on the Martin Brossman show. So, I've got my own channel, and I think they enjoyed some of our journey together. We didn't plan anything. I just knew we would have a good time connecting and rediscovering things. But Shireen, what a force she was in this school. As Elizabeth, that's a tough act to follow, Elizabeth Ely's daughter, and she held her own, didn't she?
Absolutely. Sharaine, of course, she started as a teacher,
Uh huh.
and we had some battles over the years as she evolved. We were friends. So once I graduated, I represented her as a lawyer, as I did her mother. Um, and in the end, I was the one taking her to the hospital for treatment.
Mm,
And we became close. And because when you're in that state, as
yeah.
she was in just before, um, nothing superficial matters. So we had
Right.
some real heart to heart conversations. So I would say she was like a sister at the end. And
Yeah.
she was a very, very opinionated, strong woman who really struggled living in the shadow of her mother.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but always thinking, I mean, it's like she. I just remember that wicked mind of hers. She really listened. She would challenge, but she'd hear you. She was truly listening, and
Yes.
she was not. She wasn't. I have one way, and I don't want to hear any other. No, I have a way. Go ahead, challenge it. Let's see. Of course, you probably never win, but she had is such a deep thinking person that she was. And of course, as a teacher, she encouraged that. I remember she said, "My writing style's different than others." I said, "Why?" She goes, "You write the way you speak." I didn't know other people wrote some different way. I guess the learning process was a challenge enough. I just wrote down what, I'd say it in my head and wrote it. And apparently that wasn't the way a lot of people wrote. So she was wonderful, just a great soul, I remember too.
She was. She taught me a couple of lessons that I'll never forget. The one that I think is important for people to remember, she said, in any relationship or any situation, begin as you mean to go on. Those were
Wow.
her words. And
Wow.
I've 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 learned that because in dealing with people, I want to be consistent. And she says, you set the tone from the beginning. Whoever you're going to be that person at the beginning and maintain that. That
Wow.
came from her.
Oh, that I think we should stop on that note.
Okay. Amen.
Well,
Thank
this
you,
was
Martha.
delightful.
Thank you. You are still very important to me after all these years.
Same.
Let's do it in another 5 years after, we've done some more stuff, okay?
Yes, yes. You are the same to me, and let's continue. My cell phone's always open if I ever can help you, and I
Thank you.
always feel you're someone I could call. So, and I
Absolutely.
hope to meet your kids sometime. So
I, and I
it'd be
would like to
wonderful.
meet your son
Yes, my
someday.
stepson is just a wonderful human being. Wonderful,
So
really.
I believe that, and your wife.
Yes,
You
yes.
keeping
She's
me in the closet.
I know. Well, it's a little tougher to get out, but I married the finest woman I ever met in my life, and I'm blessed to
Amen.
have a stepson that if it was my own, I couldn't be more proud.
Okay. Well, I love you, man.
Yeah, I love you too. I love
All
you
right,
too.
brother.
All
All
right.
right,
Take
brother.
care. Bye.
All right.